The unexpected knock night was quiet in Mountain View, California. Sundar Pichai sat by the window of his modest home, sipping tea, watching the glow of city lights. Even though he was one of the most powerful technology leaders in the world, he never stopped finding peace in small, simple things. Outside, the wind carried whispers of distant traffic, but inside, there was calm. It was the kind of silence that lets a person think about where they started, where they are, and where they are heading. But that night, the silence was about to be broken in a way Sundar could never have imagined. The knock came suddenly, firm, steady, and filled with a strange authority. It wasn't the knock of a neighbor asking for sugar or a friend dropping by unannounced. Sundar froze, the cup in his hand trembling slightly. His wife looked at him with curiosity, sensing the unusual weight in the sound. Slowly, he stood and walked to the door, each step echoing louder in his mind than it did on the wooden floor. When he opened the door, the sight before him made his breath catch. There, standing on his porch under the faint streetlight, was the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi himself. There were no motorcades, no cameras, no flashing lights, just the leader of the world's largest democracy, standing humbly with a gentle smile. Sundar's heart pounded. Questions rushed through his head. Why was he here? How did he come without security? What did this mean? For a moment, he forgot his words, forgot his role, forgot even the world he had built in Silicon Valley. He was just a boy from Chennai again, staring at someone who represented the dreams and struggles of millions. May I come in? Modi asked, his voice calm but carrying the weight of history. Sundar nodded quickly, almost too quickly, stepping aside, his mind spinning. As the Prime Minister entered the house, Sundar's wife greeted him with folded hands, her face showing both disbelief and respect. There was no ceremony, no prepared welcome, only raw humanity in that small living room. And yet, it felt like the world had shifted in that instant. The tea kettle still whistled faintly in the kitchen, as if reminding Sundar of the ordinary rhythm of life. But nothing was ordinary anymore. He rushed to pour tea for his guest, his hands shaking as he placed the cups on the table. Modi accepted it with grace, holding the cup with both hands, like a man who valued the gesture more than the drink itself. Sundar sat opposite him, searching for words. But the Prime Minister broke the silence. I wanted to meet you here. In your home, away from the noise of power and politics, Modi said. Too often, leaders and innovators meet in offices, in grand halls, surrounded by people who want to impress. But tonight, I want to speak to you as one son of India to another, not as Prime Minister to CEO, but as two men who carry stories of struggle, humility, and responsibility. Sundar felt his throat tighten. He thought of his childhood in Chennai, growing up in a small house with no luxuries, where every achievement was carved out of resilience. He thought of the nights when his father saved money for his education, the days when he had to share a single telephone line with neighbors, and the long journey that brought him to Google. He thought of the respect his parents taught him, the humility that shaped his every step. Now, across the table, sat another man who had risen from a tea stall to lead a nation of more than 1 billion people. In that living room, the walls seemed to fade, and only their journeys remained. As the conversation began, it felt less like words and more like a bridge being built. Modi spoke of the future of India, of technology, of the young people filled with dreams but burdened with challenges. Sundar listened intently, every sentence pulling him deeper into the weight of expectation. He had built platforms that touched billions, but this was different. This was not about algorithms or search engines. This was about the soul of a nation, about the responsibility of one man who could shape opportunity for millions who might never know his name. And suddenly, the question surfaced in Sundar's mind, why him? Why this visit? Why tonight? But before he could ask, Modi leaned forward, his eyes sharp but kind, and said something that sent a shiver down Sundar's spine. There is something I must ask of you, something I cannot ask in a meeting room or a public event. This is between us, and what you decide tonight may change the lives of countless people. Sundar's heart raced. He felt the weight of the moment pressing against his chest, heavier than any corporate decision he had ever made. He wanted to know more, to understand what this mysterious request could be. And yet, deep inside, he sensed that whatever came next would not only test his intellect but also his character, his humility, his kindness, and his resilience. The Prime Minister placed his cup on the table, the faint sound echoing through the room like a signal. Then he looked Sundar in the eyes, steady and unwavering, and asked the weight of a request for a moment. The room seemed frozen in time. The walls of Sundar Pichai's home stood still, but his heart moved faster than ever before. The Prime Minister's words hung in the air like a secret waiting to be born. Sundar leaned slightly forward, his palms pressed against his knees, trying to steady himself. He had faced boardrooms filled with investors, answered the toughest questions from journalists, even handled the sharp expectations of a global workforce. But this was different. This was not about a company. This was about a nation, about 1 billion hearts, about something that felt far bigger than even the internet itself. Sundar's eyes met Modi's, and in them, he did not see politics or authority. He saw the weight of responsibility carried quietly by a man who knew what it meant to rise from almost nothing. Sundar, Modi said slowly, his voice steady. I want you to help India dream bigger. I want you to help us leap, not step. Our youth have ideas, they have energy, but they do not always have access, guidance, or a path. Technology can be a bridge, but only if someone builds it with care, with humility, with the thought that it belongs to everyone. You have reached the top of the world, but the real question is, how can you help others climb their first step? Sundar's throat went dry. He thought back to the countless times he had stood in front of new engineers at Google, telling them about the power of innovation. He thought about the letters he received from young students in India, some writing in broken English, asking how they could one day reach where he had reached. He remembered one letter in particular, from a girl in a small village in Andhra Pradesh, who wrote that she walked miles every week to find an internet connection at a town library. She said she wanted to learn coding, but often the electricity failed, and still, she refused to give up. Sundar never forgot her words. If you can dream for me, maybe I can dream for myself. Now, as Modi spoke, that memory returned like a fire inside his chest. He wanted to respond, to promise something, but his voice betrayed him. Instead, he asked a question, soft yet trembling. But why me? There are so many leaders, so many voices in technology. Why did you come here, quietly, to ask me this? Modi leaned back slightly, his eyes searching Sundar's face. And then he smiled in a way that carried both kindness and sharp wisdom. Because you never forgot where you came from. I have watched others build success and turned away from their roots. But you always carried humility. You visit your old school, you speak of your father's sacrifices. You still live without chasing extravagance. India needs not only intelligence but also humility. A bridge is not built by ego. It is built by kindness and respect. And I see that in you. The words sank deep into Sundar's heart. He felt both honored and overwhelmed. Part of him wanted to accept immediately, to say yes to whatever the Prime Minister would ask. But another part of him hesitated, wondering what this path would mean for his family, his work, his life. He had seen how political promises could swallow even the best of intentions. He had seen how technology, when misused, could divide rather than unite. He knew the challenge would not be in building platforms but in ensuring they were used for good. And that thought carried a heavy fear. What if he failed? What if his decisions, however noble, ended up hurting the very people he wanted to help? As if sensing his inner turmoil, Modi placed his hand on the table, his fingers tapping lightly, steady and patient. I am not asking for everything tonight. I am asking for your heart to remain open. Sometimes, change begins not with action, but with willingness. I came here because I wanted you to hear this, not from an official letter, not from a grand speech, but from me, directly, as one man to another. India is calling, and sometimes, the voice of your homeland cannot be ignored. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment. In that silence, he saw images from his childhood. He saw the dimly lit room in Chennai where he studied under the soft light of a single bulb. He saw his mother cooking while his father discussed the cost of buying a scooter. He saw his first computer, the wonder in his eyes when he touched a keyboard. He saw himself boarding a plane for the first time, leaving India to study abroad, carrying with him nothing but hope. And then he saw the faces of the countless children across India today. Children who might never meet him but who dreamed as he once dreamed. When he opened his eyes again, he felt something shift inside him, a quiet resolve beginning to form. But before he could speak, before he could even decide how to answer, a sound interrupted the moment. It was faint at first, like a distant thud, but then it grew louder. Knock at the door. Not soft, not hesitant, but urgent, almost desperate. Sundar's wife looked at him in alarm, and even Modi's expression hardened. Who could it be? At this hour, on a night already filled with such mystery? Sundar rose slowly, his legs heavy with unease, and walked to the door. His hand lingered on the knob, his breath shallow, as if he already sensed that the next moment would change everything yet again. When he opened the door, what he saw made his chest tighten. Standing there was a young man, disheveled, his eyes wide with fear and determination. He looked like he had run miles without stopping. His clothes were simple, his face marked by struggle, but his voice carried urgency as he blurted out, I know this is sudden, but you must listen. What you are about to decide tonight, it'll not only change India, it will decide whether millions rise or fall. Please, hear me out before you answer him. The air inside the house grew heavier, the silence sharper. Sundar turned toward Modi, who watched calmly but with piercing eyes, as though he had expected something like this might happen. Sundar's heart pounded louder than the young man's voice. The tea on the table had gone cold, but the night had only begun to burn hotter. The voice of the unheard Sandar's hand froze on the doorframe as the young man's words pierced the quiet room. His voice was trembling, not out of weakness but from carrying a weight too heavy for someone his age. His eyes darted between Sundar and Modi, filled with desperation, as if the moment he had fought for his entire life was finally here. Sundar could not speak. He stepped aside, instinctively, letting the young stranger inside, while his wife stood back in silence, her eyes wide. The boy's clothes were wrinkled, his shoes worn thin, his breath uneven. Yet beneath the exhaustion was a fire. The kind Sundar recognized the same fire he once carried when he wanted the world to hear him. When he wanted someone to believe in him, the boy stood in the middle of the living room, clutching a worn-out notebook pressed against his chest. He looked at Modi, then at Sundar, and his words spilled out like a dam breaking. I came from a village far away. We have no stable electricity, no good schools, no proper health care. We are told to dream, but dreams cannot survive when you have nothing to hold them. And now, you sit here, in this house, deciding our future as if we are just numbers on a page. I could not stay silent. I had to come, because if you decide without hearing us, then what is the meaning of your kindness, your humility, your promise? The room grew still again. Modi's gaze remained calm, but there was a sharpness behind it. The look of a man who had heard 1,000 complaints and 1,000 pleas. Sundar felt his chest tighten, his heart torn between the Prime Minister's vision and the raw pain of this young man. For a moment, Sundar did not know where to look at the leader who carried a nation, or at the boy who carried a broken dream. The boy opened his notebook and held it out with shaking hands. The pages were filled with sketches, words, half-written ideas. Sundar leaned forward, his fingers brushing the paper, and what he saw made him pause. Crude drawings of machines, diagrams of circuits, small notes about software written in uneven English. It was not polished, not perfect, but it was alive. It was the vision of someone who wanted to build, someone who wanted to create, even when the world gave him almost nothing. I want to be an engineer, the boy said, his voice cracking. I want to invent things that can help my village, my country. But every time I try, I hit walls. No internet, no support, no money for books. We are told to wait, to be patient, but how many years will pass before someone listens? Mr. Pichai, you came from a place not so different from mine. Tell me, what would have happened if no one gave you a chance? Would you even be sitting here today? The question stabbed deep into Sundar's soul. He remembered his father, how he once sold shares to buy him a plane ticket, how every step forward had been a sacrifice from someone else. He thought of the boy's cracked voice, echoing his own struggles from decades ago. And for the first time that night, Sundar realized the choice before him was not abstract. It was not just about policies or platforms. It was about this boy, and millions like him, standing at the edge of possibility, waiting for someone to push open the door. Modi finally spoke, his tone even, but with a firmness that carried centuries of leadership. Young man, you are right to speak. But no, this change is not born overnight. It takes years of struggle, and patience is part of that struggle. I came here to ask Sundar for something that could make your life and lives like yours easier. But you must understand, building dreams requires both urgency and patience. Without patience, urgency becomes chaos. Without urgency, patience becomes silence. The boy shook his head fiercely, his fists clenched. But Prime Minister, with all respect, we have been patient for too long. Our patience has become chains. We cannot wait another generation while others move forward. If technology is a bridge, then let someone build it now. Let Sundar help us now. Sundar felt sweat gather on his palms. His heart was split between two truths, the wisdom of patience and the desperation of urgency. He looked at Modi, who sat unmoved, and at the boy, whose eyes blazed with pain. The silence between them felt unbearable. And then, in that unbearable silence, Sundar realized something. This was not about choosing one voice over the other. This was about finding a way to honor both. He leaned back, his voice finally steady, though his heart still raced. Perhaps the answer is not to wait endlessly, nor to rush blindly. Perhaps it is to build step by step, but with speed that respects the urgency. I cannot promise everything tonight, but I can promise to begin. Sometimes, the first brick in a bridge is the most important. If we place it right, the rest can follow. The boy's breathing slowed, his anger softening into something like hope. Modi's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Sundar as if weighing every word. The room was no longer just a living room. It had become a battlefield of visions, where every sentence carried the weight of futures unseen. And just as the air seemed to calm, another sound shattered the stillness. This time, it was not a knock. It was the sharp vibration of Sundar's phone on the table. The screen lit up, glowing with a message that made his blood run cold. He picked it up, his fingers trembling as he read the words aloud. Do not agree to anything tonight. You do not understand the danger you are walking into. The message had no name, no number, only the shadow of a warning that left Sundar staring at the screen, his pulse thundering while Modi and the boy watched in silence. Asterisk, the shadow behind the message. The glow of the phone screen seemed brighter than the lights in the room, as if those few words carried more power than the presence of even the Prime Minister himself. Sundar's eyes fixed on the message, his mind running in circles, trying to untangle its meaning. Who would send such a warning? How did they know what was happening inside this quiet home? No one was supposed to know. Yet here it was, a voice from the shadows, urging him not to take a step he had not even fully understood himself. His hand shook as he placed the phone down on the table, and the faint thud of it landing sounded louder than it should have. Modi leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp but calm, the kind of look that measured both the man and the moment. You must not be shaken by every whisper, he said slowly. When someone walks toward change, shadows always try to pull him back. The question is, do you trust yourself, or do you trust the shadows? His voice carried authority, but it also carried an unspoken challenge. Sundar looked at him, then at the boy, whose eyes were wide with fear, and suddenly, he felt as if two paths were stretching before him, each one hidden by fog. The boy stepped closer, his voice urgent, trembling with both fear and conviction. No, sir, this is not just a shadow. I have seen this before. Every time someone powerful tries to bring change, there are those who will stop at nothing to protect what they already control. Maybe this message is not a lie. Maybe it is the only truth you will hear tonight. His words carried a raw honesty that cut through the air, and Sundar could not ignore it. Memories flooded back to Sundar the betrayals he had seen in the corporate world, the way ambition sometimes poisoned even the brightest minds, the way small decisions turned into storms. He knew that information could be twisted, and trust could be broken in the quietest ways. His mind replayed the message again and again, each repetition heavier than the last. Do not agree to anything tonight. For a moment, Sundar closed his eyes and let silence wash over him. In that silence, he thought of his father's steady voice telling him that integrity was not about what others said, but about what he chose when no one was watching. He thought of his mother's gentle reminders that every choice carries a ripple, touching lives far beyond his sight. And then he opened his eyes and realized that tonight was not just about technology or politics. It was about trust, about courage, about choosing who to believe when every voice sounded both true and dangerous. Modi broke the silence again, his tone firmer this time. Sundar, I did not come here to force your hand. I came here because I believed you would understand what India needs. If you let fear guide you, fear will own you. If you let shadows speak louder than your heart, you will never know what light you could have built. His words carried the force of conviction, but also the subtle sting of expectation. The boy shook his head fiercely, his fists clenched as though holding on to invisible chains. And if you let power guide you, you may never see how many fall in the name of progress. Trust your heart, yes, but remember that even hearts can be tricked by grand promises. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of living that truth. Sundar sat back, feeling the air grow heavier with every word. His own breathing was uneven, his pulse echoing in his ears. The room, once just a living room, had become a battlefield of unseen forces. Trust on one side, suspicion on the other. And in the middle him, a man who had once only wanted to build, now being asked to carry futures he had never imagined. He picked up the phone again, staring at the message as though it might reveal its sender if he only looked hard enough. The number was hidden, untraceable, like a ghost speaking from behind the walls. And then, as he stared, the phone vibrated again. Another message appeared, its words colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. You are being watched. Say yes tonight, and you will regret it forever. The blood drained from Sundar's face. His hands trembled as he placed the phone down once more. But before he could speak, before he could even process what the message meant, the lights in the house flickered. First once, then twice. Then the room was swallowed in darkness. The only sound was the sharp intake of breath from his wife and the pounding of his own heart. In the sudden silence of the blackout, Modi's voice came steady, unwavering. Now you must decide. Sundar, who do you believe, the voice in front of you, or the voice hiding in the dark? And in that moment, Sundar realized the question was no longer about India alone. It was about truth itself. The silence inside the darkness swallowed the room like a wave, leaving only the faint glow of the city outside filtering through the window. Sundar's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, no one moved. The hum of machines, the soft rhythm of the refrigerator, even the faint ticking of the clock all seemed to vanish into silence. It was not the ordinary silence of night, but a silence that felt alive, heavy, and filled with secrets waiting to reveal themselves. Sundar reached instinctively for his phone to use its light, but even as he raised it, the screen went blank, as though the device itself had surrendered to the blackout. His wife's voice broke the silence, trembling but controlled. What is happening? She whispered, her hand finding his arm in the dark. Sundar wanted to comfort her, but his own fear pressed against his chest like an iron weight. Across the table, he could hear the faint rustle of Modi shifting, steady and unshaken, as though he had expected this. And then there was the boy, his breaths sharp and uneven, each one filled with both fear and urgency. Sundar took a cautious step toward the drawer where he kept a flashlight. But before he could reach it, a sound drifted through the darkness, a faint creak of floorboards from the hallway. It was not the sound of anyone in the room. It came from deeper inside the house. Sundar froze. His mind raced. Who else could be here? Had someone entered unnoticed? Or had they been inside all along, waiting for this moment? The thought sent a chill crawling down his spine. Modi's voice came low but firm, slicing through the dark like a blade. We are not alone. It was not a guess. It was certainty. Sundar's heart hammered. His home, once his sanctuary, now felt like a place of shadows and hidden eyes. He fumbled forward, finally finding the flashlight. And when he clicked it on, a narrow beam of light cut through the blackness. He swung the beam slowly across the room. First, it caught the boy's frightened face, his wide eyes shining like glass. Then Modi's calm, steady expression, unmoved even now. Sundar turned the beam toward the hallway, and the light revealed something that made his breath catch. On the floor lay faint footprints, smudged with dirt, leading deeper into the house. They were fresh. Sundar raised the light, his hand trembling, and saw a shadow at the end of the hallway, tall, still, almost blending into the walls. For a moment, the figure did not move. Then, as the light lingered, it shifted slightly, enough to show it was not a trick of the dark. Someone was there, inside his home, watching. The boy gasped and stepped back. Sundar's wife clutched his arm tighter, her nails digging into his skin. But Modi did not flinch. He spoke again, his tone calm, yet commanding. "Whoever you are, come out. Hiding in the dark will not give you power." For a moment, there was no response. Then, the shadow stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and into the light came a man Sundar had never seen before. His clothes were plain, his face weathered, his eyes cold. He carried no weapon, yet his presence felt like a storm. The man's voice was low, rough like stone scraping against stone. "You should not be having this meeting. What you are planning will not only change India, it will break powers you cannot see. I came to warn you, but warnings are never enough. You must stop before it is too late." Sundar's knees weakened. First, the mysterious messages, and now a stranger standing inside his own house, speaking with the same urgency. His heart thudded painfully. How much of this night was coincidence, and how much was a trap carefully woven around him? The boy shouted, his voice cracking with anger. "You are lying. You are one of those who want to keep us chained, who fear the change that could lift us. You came here to scare him, but we are not afraid." The stranger turned his gaze toward the boy, unblinking. "Child, you speak of chains, but you know nothing of the walls built around you. Sometimes change is a weapon used by those in power, not a gift for the weak. Tonight, you must ask yourself who gains and who loses. If this man agrees." The words struck Sundar like a blow. The weight of the decision grew heavier, pressing down until his chest ached. He looked at Modi, whose silence was now deeper than the dark itself. He looked at the boy, whose hope flickered like fire, desperate to survive. And now he looked at the stranger, whose warning carried the coldness of someone who had seen truths too dangerous to ignore. The flashlight flickered, the beam thinning, threatening to die. Sundar's voice finally broke through the silence, filled with both fear and resolve. "Enough," he whispered. "Enough of warnings and shadows. If there is danger, tell me the truth. Tell me what it is I am walking into. I cannot decide while everyone speaks in riddles." The stranger's expression hardened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was almost a growl. "Then listen carefully. The choice you make tonight is not about building or not building. It is about loyalty. Once you choose, you cannot turn back. One path will tie you to power you cannot control. The other will place you against forces that will not forgive you. There is no middle ground. Sundar, you must choose your master." The flashlight flickered again, then went out, plunging the room into total darkness. And in that black silence, Sundar felt a cold truth settle into his heart. Whatever he chose tonight would not only decide India's future, but also who he himself would become. The choice in the silence darkness pressed against every wall, wrapping the room in a suffocating stillness. Sundar could hear only the rhythm of breathing around him, his wife's trembling, the boy's urgent gasps, Modi's steady calm, and the stranger's low, unyielding presence. His own heartbeat thundered so loud it felt as though the whole house could hear it. In that silence, he understood something he had never wanted to face. There was no way to step back. The night had cornered him, and the choice demanded itself with ruthless patience. His fingers searched in the dark until they found the edge of the table. He leaned against it, grounding himself, his mind spiraling through memories. He thought of Chennai, the narrow streets where he once played as a boy, the quiet sacrifices of his parents, the way every small kindness had shaped his life. He thought of the long path from those crowded lanes to the boardrooms of Silicon Valley. He thought of the faces he had met across the world, people who used the technology he built, some to connect, some to learn, some to survive. And he thought of the boy in his living room, clutching a notebook full of dreams that might never see the light if no one acted. The stranger's voice broke through, harsh and unyielding. "Do not fool yourself into thinking you can help everyone. The powers behind this choice are deeper than nations, deeper than promises. Once you take a side, you will belong to it forever." But before Sundar could answer, Modi's voice rose, calm but filled with quiet authority. "And do not fool yourself into thinking silence will protect you. In life, neutrality is often another form of surrender. You must decide not because the world demands it, but because your own heart does. India is not asking for perfection, it is asking for effort, for the courage to begin." The boy stepped closer, his voice breaking with emotion. "You told me once, Mr. Pichai, that the first step matters more than any other. If you walk away tonight, you tell children like me that our first step will never come. Please, do not leave us waiting in the dark.